Okay, hi everybody, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's great to see you all. And just while we wait for everybody to arrive, there's a big queue of people outside the room. Please let us know which city you are joining us from. This is a Ukraine exclusive webinar, but let us know where you are. Are you in the country? Are you maybe in a neighboring country? Let us know in the chat box just while we wait for everyone to arrive. Okay, hi from Lviv, hi Elena. Kiev, Chernihiv, hi Ina. Or Ina, I apologize for any mispronunciation. Hi Natalia from Kiev. Lviv, lots from Lviv. Perfect. Okay, just while more people are arriving, keep telling us where you are joining us from. And I'm just going to go through the protocols for today's session. So we've already found the chat box, which is great, but please, when you're using the chat box, make sure you are sending your message to everyone rather than just the hosts and the panelists, okay? That way, everybody can see your comments and everyone can join in the conversation. If you do have any very specific questions that you want to ask throughout the session, please use the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. Because with the chat, as you can see, it goes past really quickly and we lose track. Whereas with the Q&A, it stays in one place and we can answer them with greater ease. Some other bits of housekeeping. I know that many of you may not be able to stay for the whole webinar. That's okay. It is being recorded and you will be sent a link to that recording along with the all-important certificates around the same time tomorrow. So keep an eye for that email from Zoom with a link to the recording, a link to the certificate, as well as a link to a survey as well. Okay, so we can see today I'm joined by Diana Golovin from NGL Ukraine, from Linguist, and Ellen Setterfield, who will be giving the main talk. But we're going to start off with a little introduction from Diana before we will hand over to Ellen. So Diana, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. That's great to welcome you here. I have been watching how many places you are in now. So there are people from all over Ukraine, like south part, eastern part, west, center of Ukraine. That's amazing, I think. And I do hope that you will get lots of interesting insights, and this webinar will inspire you to finish this school year in a very great way. And I'm Diana Golovin, an ELT consultant I work in Linguist company that is a official representative of National Geographic Learning in Ukraine. Here are my contact details. If you need any help with the National Geographic Learning products, any consultation, please do not hesitate, contact me. I'll be happy to help you or to show you how everything works. Also, just several words where you can find information about a series from National Geographic Learning that Linguist company is proudly selling. So our site, linguist.ngl.com.ua, this is where you can get to know a lot about books. There are links for lots of useful resources like samples or content and some free resources like annual planner for teachers in Ukraine. And also there is blog where we keep our articles, additional materials, lots of interesting things. So visit this site to get to know more about it. If you would like to order the book, you contact a Linguist company. Here is the site of our company. And if you have manager in Linguist, you also can just contact him or her and ask about the books or maybe for some consultation. I'm also happy to announce that there is an internet shop where now you can order books in a quicker way. If you need just one textbook for yourself or for your private student, you can visit this shop and quickly and conveniently order everything. Actually, that was all that I would like to share with you. And now I would like to give the word back to Alex.
Perfect. Thank you, Diana. And I'm going to very quickly introduce Ellie Setterfield, who is the Young Learner Product Marketing Manager or Executive for National Geographic Learning. She has over 15 years of experience working with children and teenagers in multiple countries around the world. And she is passionate about helping teachers become better teachers and help young learners use English to understand the world around them. So without further ado, Ellie, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you very much, Diana, for such lovely introductions to everything. It's great to be back here, and I'm really looking forward to this webinar this afternoon. It's been quite a while since I've done one for Ukraine, so it's lovely to see so many of you here. Now, I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Hopefully you can all see my presentation.
Perfect, Ellie.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. So let's get started. Now, this is going to be quite a practical, quite an interactive webinar. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions, and I hope that you will join in and answer things. Let me know things in the chat box as we're going along. So with no further ado, let's get started. I'd like to start by thinking about what makes a good teacher. Now, I don't know if you've ever asked your students this question. So this was something that I did in one of my teaching jobs when I was working in the Czech Republic. I asked my learners who were in grade 4 at the time, so these were sort of 8, 9-year-olds, what do you think makes a good teacher? And these were the things that they came up with. They said that you must be smart. Okay, yeah, I think that's probably right. We know that it's important to have good background knowledge, don't we? We need to know our subjects. They said that you need to have a good class, which I think is quite insightful. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good a teacher you are. If your students are trying to derail everything, it's quite a challenge. They said you need to be intelligent. They said you need to be happy. Sometimes be quiet, which again, I think is a good point. Sometimes you need to just sit back and let your students be involved. Let them speak, let them share their ideas. And you need to eat. Okay, fair enough. They were in grade 4. They do like eating, and it is important as teachers that we take care of ourselves. Then I asked them, okay, what should a good teacher not do? What mustn't they do? And they said, you mustn't be shy, which I think sometimes there are actually some very good teachers who are quite shy, but it's a case of being confident in front of your students, isn't it? They mustn't put their pen in their nose. Again, they were grade 4. Actually, I was quite pleased to see them say this because I had a couple of students in that class who routinely put their pen in their nose, and I was often telling them to stop doing it. So this did show that they listened to me. They mustn't be stupid. They mustn't be late. And they mustn't kill their students, which you would hope was really a bit of a given. Now I spotted Pavlo has contributed there in the chat already. He said that they must be a good listener. But what do you think? What makes a good teacher? So Nina, I can see, has got some great ideas there. She says they must have contagious enthusiasm for the subject and learning in general that inspires students. Definitely, yeah, I think that's really important. That definitely makes a good teacher. Need to be a good communicator, yeah. You must be passionate, definitely. Any other thoughts or ideas? What makes a good teacher? Be friends with their students. Yeah, we need to be relatable, don't we? We need to be someone that they feel they can approach, that they're comfortable with being with, and they're comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas. Natalia says enthusiastic, a good listener. Be respectful, definitely. Constantly moving forward. There must be a leader. Confidence, intelligence, dedication, and love for the work. Yeah, brilliant. A good sense of humor. Marina, yes, I like that idea. That's a really good point. We do need to have a good sense of humor, don't we? Be open-minded, be understanding. Fantastic. Yeah, really good ideas there. Really nice ideas. Thank you for sharing all of those. So, on a more serious note, we can think of a good teacher as all of the things that you've just described, but also this. Teachers who are most successful in engaging students develop activities with students' basic psychological and intellectual needs in mind. So let's think about our young learners and what those needs are. What are their psychological and intellectual needs? When you think about your young learners, what are they like? What are their characteristics? They're curious, definitely. They're they're active. Yeah, they like movement, don't they? Often they're very energetic. What else? They like games, they like change, they like activities, like to play. They're active, they're noisy. They quickly lose attention, yeah. They can be naughty, definitely. They're not very knowledgeable, they can be naive, they're creative. Another vote for active, another vote for curiosity. They're open-minded, they're smart, they're joyful. Brilliant, thank you everyone. Another vote for curious there from Ella. They're funny. Yes, definitely. Our young learners can be all of these things, can't they? I just came up with a few ideas here, but many of these are what you've already said. They're energetic, they're spontaneous, they're curious, they're imaginative, they're easily distracted, they're egocentric, and they're social as well, aren't they? They're learning all about the world around them. They're not just learning English. They're learning how they relate to other people. They're learning about the world they live in. They're learning about their place in it and how they relate to all of that. Okay. So that's what our young learners are like then, in terms of some of their physiological needs. If we think about those different characteristics, we can get some ideas about the things they need, can't we? If we know that they're active, we know we need to give them opportunities to move around, to be involved. If they're social, then we know that we need to give them opportunities to talk. We need to give them opportunities to work in pairs or to work in groups. If they're sometimes easily distracted, we need to give them opportunities to change activity. We need to use materials that are engaging and interesting. We need to sometimes incorporate things that we know that they are interested in as well, outside of maybe the course book that we're using, all of those things to get and to maintain their attention where possible. But what about their intellectual needs? Well, Confucius said this: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do, and I understand. And this is particularly true for our young learners. But how exactly do primary school children or elementary school children learn? Well, to find out more about this, I'd like to just briefly touch upon 3 theories from these 3 gentlemen. And they are Jean Piaget, I'm sure you'll know these names, Lev Vygotsky, and more recently, Jerome Bruner. Now, Piaget was the first of these, and he came up with an action-based theory, which tells us that children are active thinkers and learners. They learn through their own individual actions and exploration. They learn through trying to solve problems and work things out for themselves. So giving our students opportunities to learn by doing and learn by interacting with their environment is paramount. This could be through using realia, by using TPR, total physical response, or by simply giving our students the opportunity to work things out for themselves. For example, when we're teaching grammar, we might take more of a guided discovery approach rather than just telling them the rules. Now, in the 1920s and 30s, Vygotsky came along and he noticed the importance of social interaction in how children learn. He noticed that children construct knowledge through interaction with other people, specifically through interaction with adults and more competent peers. Now, in his theory, the child has an actual developmental level and a potential level of development. And Vygotsky referred to the area between the two as ZPD, the zone of proximal development. When left to their own devices, the children in his experiments achieved far less than when they were given guidance and assistance by an adult. Now, in order to help our students learn, that means that we need to offer them plenty of opportunities for social interaction, but also social interaction that guides them and challenges them and helps them to achieve more than they could on their own. Sorry, that was disappearing. Now, in the mid-1970s, the most recent of these ideas that we're going to look at was Bruner. And in the mid-1970s, he also focused on the importance of guidance in a child's development. He actually studied parents rather than children and teachers, but he noticed how they provided effective scaffolding, how they broke things down, how they supported their child in something that they were learning to do. Namely, they made the child interested in the task. They simplified the task by breaking it down into smaller steps. They kept the child on task when they were getting distracted. They reminded them what the end goal was. And they modeled the task, including different ways of doing it. So let's summarize all of that. How do children learn? Well, they learn through all of these things. They learn through having lots of meaningful exposure to the language. They learn through having topics that arouse their curiosity. They learn through social interaction, through physical activity, through opportunities to experiment and work things out for themselves, through praise and support, through effective scaffolding, and through having a reason to use the language. Now, it's a lot for us to think about, isn't it? And hopefully you're not thinking, like this guy, oh my goodness, this is so much to take on. It's so much to bear in mind. It's so much to think about, isn't it? When all we really want to do is just plan our lesson, to think about what do we need to do? What are we going to teach in our classes? What are we going to do in our next lesson? So for the rest of this webinar, we're going to be thinking quite practically. We're going to move on a bit from the theory, and we're going to share some ideas of things that you can do in your lessons. Now, lots of these are all ideas that I've tried in my classrooms myself at different points. So they're all things that are tried and tested. And I promise you, I'm not going to share anything with you that didn't work or that didn't go down well with my learners. So the book that we're looking at today is Wonderful World 2nd edition, which is published by National Geographic Learning. But you could equally apply these ideas and these activities to a different course book if you're not using that one. If you are interested in this series, then you can look at the website that Diana shared at the beginning and speak to my colleagues at Linguist, and they'll be delighted to help you find some more information about it. So let's have a look. Let's open up the book and get started. So this unit is from level 3, unit 8 of Wonderful World 2nd edition, and I chose this unit to work with today because I really like this unit. So at the beginning of the unit, we've got this really beautiful, eye-catching picture, haven't we? But how can we make the most of it? What can we do with this picture? Has anyone got any ideas? What could you do if you had this picture in your lesson and you wanted to do an activity involving it? I'm aware I'm putting you on the spot here. Don't worry if you can't think of anything on the spot, because I've got lots of ideas too. So thanks, Olga. Yep, so they could describe it. Yeah, you could ask your students how it would make them feel. Definitely. Any other thoughts or ideas? Oksana says it makes it, yeah, it might make you feel terrific. It might make you feel excited. Yeah, you could draw the same. Yeah, Nina says we can ask some questions about the picture. Brilliant. Tell you a story, what you think is going on, make a story about it. Definitely, yeah. So there are lots of different things we could do with this, aren't there? We could think of some activity, we can think of some adjectives, to describe the photo. So we've had a few adjectives already. I think we've said amazing, we've said terrific. Any other thoughts? What adjectives could we use to describe this picture? It's sunny. Yeah, it does look like the weather's quite nice, doesn't it? It's exciting, fantastic. Dangerous. Yeah, it could be, couldn't it? It is very high up. Mysterious. Awesome. It's high, it's green, it's scary. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. So easy way to start could be to think of some adjectives to describe the photo and describe what you can see. A couple of you mentioned ideas about how you feel looking at the picture, and we could take that one step further, couldn't we? We could ask our students to imagine that they are in this picture, and we could ask them to predict what is being said or what is being thought by this person. So any ideas? What is this person thinking? Imagine that you're that person. Oh my God, yes, possibly. I think I would definitely be thinking that. I don't like heights very much, so I think I would be scared. They might be thinking I'd like to jump, hopefully not. When will be the end of the road? Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, it might be someone who's feeling very proud of themselves for being there, mightn't it? Yeah, that was my idea. I just came up with the very obvious. It's very high up here. It's a long way up. Now, we could turn that into a longer exercise if we wanted to. We could ask our students to interview a person in the picture, and we could even turn that into a role play if we wanted to, couldn't we? We could ask them to come up with a series of questions that we'd like to ask this person and imagine that they can interview them. So we could say, what questions would you ask about the picture? What would you ask the people in it? We could also do something like this. We could use I know, I think, I wonder. So that's just a simple framework for our students. We could ask them, what do they know about the picture or about the topic? So they might look at the picture and say, well, I know it's very high up, for example. I can see that. We can ask them what they think about the picture. So make a prediction based on what you can see. Maybe I think it's some kind of tourist attraction. I think you can probably pay to visit this. And I wonder, what else is something that they want to know about it? I know when I've asked people this before, sometimes they've said, I wonder how you get here. Do you have to climb up lots and lots and lots of steps? Is there a cable car? Do you come from somewhere at the top and then come down to get here? Or do you come all the way up from the bottom? We could also ask something like this. We could use a KWL chart. So ask our students, what do they know about the topic? What do they want to know about the topic? And then at the end of the lesson, we can review this and ask them what they have learned about the topic. We can also use the lesson planner to help us answer the students' questions about this, if they have any. There's an about the photo section in the lesson planner for each of these unit opener photos, which gives us more information. So I know in the past, sometimes people have wondered how high this is, for example, or how long is this path, and that information is all contained in that about the photo section there. So you've got it to be able to tell your students if they want to know. Okay, fantastic ideas, everyone. Thank you for sharing all of those with me. Now let's move on to the next lesson in the book then. So we've looked at some ideas for what we can do to use the picture. Let's now look at what we can do with some different things. So before we start looking more closely at how we can exploit these pages and how we can use them in our lesson, just a note about global citizenship. So you'll find this reflected in the content of reading and listening texts and videos throughout the series. It emphasizes the ability to respect and cooperate with individuals from different cultures and different backgrounds, and also understanding other nations and cultures. How people celebrate, how other people eat is different, what they do in their free time is different, where they live is different. And yet fundamentally, we are all the same, even though we have all of these differences. You'll find lots and lots of things about this. These ideas of these things are different, but also there are fundamental similarities. Now, in the reading text that we're going to look at in a moment, you can see an example of this. Our young learners need to be aware at an age-appropriate level of the differences in the world around them. Now, before we move on to the reading text, we need to pre-teach our vocabulary, don't we? And you can see at the top here, we've got the vocabulary strip. So we've got the pictures and also the words there. So the vocabulary is displayed visually to help our young learners gain an understanding and also make it a bit more memorable for them. And there are lots and lots of ideas for how to teach vocabulary in the introduction to the lesson planner. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of these different ways now, but there are lots of different ways to Preteach Vocabulary. It could be things like bringing objects into class, so using realia. It could be finding pictures of the objects, for example, in magazines or catalogues. You could use actions or mime to help your learners understand and remember meaning. You could explain the meaning of the word in L1 if you wanted to, and then give examples of it used in an English sentence. So lots of different ideas for introducing vocabulary. And of course, remembering whichever of these you do to ask concept checking questions. And we've got some more vocabulary there. We'll move on in a moment to thinking about vocabulary and the different ways we can present it. Now, if we think about the reading text now. So we've got this text, but it's about this very strange looking house in the picture. And it's probably not a house that looks anything like where your students live. It's something a little bit unusual, a bit different. So we could ask our students very simply as a pre-reading task or as a quick reading, just to look at the picture and then read the text. How is it different to your house? How is it similar to your house? But we can also use something like this to focus their attention on that. So we can use a Venn diagram. We could encourage our students to draw it in their books or draw it up on the board and get them to organize their ideas. One really good reason to use a Venn diagram like this is it develops our students' visual literacy skills as well as helping them have a format to present their ideas. So we can have things that are unique to their house on the left, things that are unique to the house in the picture on the right, and the things that are the same in the middle. So for example, my house is definitely not shaped like a football, and their house in the picture is, but both of the houses have windows, for example. They both have a door. They've got some things that are the same, even though on the face of it, they look very, very different. Now, let's just move on to our second set of vocabulary. So imagine that you're teaching this set of vocab in your lesson, these different types of house or places where people live, I guess. They're not really all quite houses, are they? What could we do with this set of vocabulary? Does anyone have any ideas? How could we practice this vocabulary with our learners? If we've established what the different words mean, they understand the meaning of the words, but what could we do with them to practice using them and to think about them? Okay, so Olga says you could get them to make a dialogue. Yep, they could do a flashcard game, definitely. Any other thoughts? They could do some kind of project. Yeah, definitely. They could look at something a lot more in depth and do a project based on a particular type of house. They could make sentences using them, definitely. Another vote for story. They could put them in a table. Yeah, so maybe they could put them into different categories, for example. Yeah, okay. So one option is something like this. We could do a ranking or a categorizing type activity with them. So we could ask the students to rank the words individually and then to compare their list with another group. It sounds simple, but it actually involves lots of logic and critical thinking. So, for example, a student might decide if they're thinking about from the most common to the least common, they might decide that a flat is probably the most common. That's going to be the case in the vast majority of places, but it does get more complicated than that. I used to teach in the Czech Republic, and there it's very common to have a flat, but it's also quite common to have a cottage in the countryside that you go to on the weekend, for example. So people have both. They're both quite common. What about the Bajau people? They traditionally live on boats in Southeast Asia. So for them, maybe the motorboat is the houseboat is the most common. Is it more unusual for someone to live in a tower or in a castle? I don't know. They're both pretty unusual. The aim is not for students to arrive at one correct answer, but to get them to think more deeply about the words, about what they represent, and about how they relate to each other. Now, in doing so, students are required to use all of their language skills, and they're much more likely to remember and use the vocabulary words as a result. It also gives them an opportunity, if we're asking them to do this in a pair or in a group, to have that social interaction that we said earlier was really important. We could also, again, use a Venn diagram, a little bit like the one we had before, but we've got a different lexical set here. I just wanted to share this one with you as an example. So we could think about sports, for example. Which of these sports can be played indoors? Which of them can be played outdoors? And which ones can be both, for example? So again, we've got to think very specifically about what the words are, what do they mean, how do they relate to these other things, these other ideas, and these other concepts. So some slightly different ways to think about the vocabulary there. Now, let's move on from the vocabulary for a moment, and let's talk briefly about grammar. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the grammar here, but we can work towards a more inductive and more modern approach to the grammar. So we can write the example sentences on the board that we've got here. So I don't like cities. Robbie often plays in the garden. I'm looking at the stars. Or we can personalize our own sentences. We can come up with our own sentences, maybe using the students in our class, for example. And we can ask our students to work out what the difference is between them, both in terms of form and in terms of meaning. So we're encouraging our students to problem solve. We're not just presenting them with the grammar topic and the rules, we're encouraging them to think a bit more about it themselves. What does this look like? What is the structure of it? And why are we using it here? Why are we using the present simple? Why are we using the present continuous when we're using them? And we can also use interactive, practical ways of practicing the grammar. So one thing that I always quite like doing with present simple and present continuous, but particularly with present continuous, is doing miming or charade type activities. So getting students to mime something and asking the class, what are they doing? Okay. Now, let's have a look again at the reading activity. So we spoke very briefly about reading at the beginning in terms of the vocabulary, but what else could we do with the reading lesson? So there are some different ideas we can use. We could do timed reading, for example. So we can set a timer for 1 minute. We can ask our students to read individually in their heads and see how far through the passage they get. Then at the end of that, we ask them to read again, but this time try and get further. And then one final time, try and get further on in the passage. Now, it's a little bit of a strange activity because it's different to what we normally think of as a reading exercise, isn't it? We normally think of reading exercises as read the text, answer the questions, or read the text, find the information. But this is actually a really worthwhile activity for our students. It's engaging because there is an element of competition. It's getting students to compete against themselves. Can they get further on in the passage? Can they read more quickly each time? It increases their automaticity when it comes to reading. And in time, it will help students become more fluent readers. So that's an easy activity that we can do with reading. That's a little bit different. Also, don't be afraid to change things around. If you have an activity in the course book that you want to use, but you don't necessarily want to use it how and when it is used. So in the course book here, you've got the reading text, and then afterwards you've got this true or false activity. But why not do it a bit differently and use the true or false activity before the students read? This helps the students predict what they're going to read about. It gives them a little bit more support. If you've got weaker students in your class and you want them to make some predictions before reading. If you've got stronger students and you just want to get them to come up with some ideas themselves based on the title of the text or based on the picture, that's great. But if you've got students who are a little bit weaker and you want to give them a bit more help about making predictions before they read and check their answers, doing the true or false activity first and then reading to check is a good idea. Now, if we go back to the vocabulary again, we spoke a little bit about ranking or ordering tasks earlier, but here's just a few more ideas here. So where would you most like to live? Where would you least like to live? Where is the cheapest? Where is the most expensive? Where is the most comfortable or the least comfortable? We're encouraging our students to personalize what they're reading. So they're not just thinking about the vocabulary, they're thinking about how it relates to their own thoughts and ideas. Now let's move on from lesson 1 and let's look at the second lesson in the book. So this is a very similar format to lesson 1. If you've looked at the previous 2 pages and then you look at this, you'll notice some similarities. You've got the vocabulary in the vocab strip at the top of the page. You've got a reading text and you have got a grammar lesson. But we don't need to necessarily repeat the same thing every lesson. It's better for our students if we don't, if we have that variety that we can do with them. So let's think about a few more ideas of things that we could do with the reading lesson. So we could do a dictogloss, for example, with 1 paragraph. I wouldn't use the whole text for this because it will be too long. So for a dictogloss, the teacher dictates the text. So we would read it out loud. The students write down the main points, the key words and phrases that they hear. And then the students work together in pairs or in small groups to reconstruct the original text, see how close they can get it to the original text there. So that's a great way of our students not only practicing their listening skills, but also their note-taking skills as well, and trying to write down the key points so that then they can recreate the original text. We could do a running dictation. So similar idea in that it's going to be a dictation, but a little bit different. We can put part of the text, for example, on the wall at the front of the classroom or in the corridor outside if you want to give your students a little bit more exercise and you haven't got other teachers or other people around you that will get upset about it. Put your students into pairs, and in each pair they need to decide there's going to be one person who is the scribe, who is going to write, and one person who is going to run and read. They can alternate between the two. I find that often it's a good idea for them to alternate each go, especially if you have students who tend to choose the same role all the time. It gives them a good opportunity to practice both. Now, when you say go, the runner has to run, they have to go to the text. They have to read it and remember what it says, come back and dictate it to the scribe who writes it down. So it's like a dictation, but with more movement involved. We said at the beginning, when thinking about our young learners, they're very active. They need to move around. They've got lots of energy. And this is a great way of letting them burn off some of that energy while practicing their reading skills. We can also use something like this. We've got the questions in the text, about the text, to do a running comprehension. So similar principle to the running dictation. Have the students in pairs. One person is going to write, one person is going to run. But this time, rather than copying down the text word for word, the students need to find the answer to the question and write it down, but they're not allowed to take the paper with them. So the runner needs to look, they need to remember the question, go, look, find the answer, remember the answer, come back, tell their partner, and their partner writes down the answer. So 2 ways to practice reading and to do reading activities that are a little bit more active, a little bit more exciting than just the reading activity in the book. We could also do repeated reading. So this developed out of a theory in the late 1970s, where they found that repeatedly reading a text allowed improved reading ability. We could come back to a text that's already been used, but use a different activity with it or ask different questions about it. Now we're going to move on from reading and think about speaking now. So we're on to lesson 3, and I wanted to draw your attention to this box here, the Say It Like This box. So this is designed to develop students' ability to communicate effectively in English. It provides useful pointers and useful phrases for vocabulary. And we could use it to help our students put together a personal phrase book or a vocabulary book, vocabulary diary or vocabulary log, especially if we use it in conjunction with something like this. So a vocabulary log graphic organizer that you can find on the website, for example. All students can just keep a copy of something like this in a notebook. So they note down vocabulary and then they've got it all together in one place for them to refer to. But it's personalized, it's things that are going to be useful for them to use. Now, we think about exercise 3 here. So this exercise, we've got a quiz here, but how could we make that more interesting and more exciting for our learners? Well, our students could create their own quiz. They could come up with questions about their country or their city or other facts that they know. They could even use the internet or a reference book to help them. And it's a good opportunity to help them develop their communication and collaboration skills here. So good practice of 21st century skills by getting them to come up with their own quiz questions. And then they can always test each other as well. I find if you are going to do a quiz with your students where you get them to write the questions, it's a very good idea to give them some kind of constraint as to the topic, because there will always be one student or one group of students who tries to come up with the hardest, most obscure questions that no one else will know the answer to because they are so ridiculous and niche. So give them some kind of boundaries as to questions about this topic, not questions about absolutely anything or everything. Okay. Particularly if they're using the internet to do some research. Now we're going to move on and think about writing. So we've spoken a bit about vocabulary, we've spoken a bit about grammar and about reading, but now we're going to think about writing and a writing lesson. So the activities in Wonderful World Second Edition are carefully staged to develop students' writing skills as well as giving them practice. You'll notice that at the top where it's got writing, it says connectors. So there is a particular writing skill that is being focused on here. And don't forget as well that 21st century skills come into writing, because writing is an opportunity for students to exercise their ability to communicate and to be creative as well. But what are some top tips for encouraging our students to engage with writing tasks? So we can see, just as an aside, we can see the staging there, that we've got activities that lead very carefully one into the other there. So to encourage our students to engage with writing, first of all, we can encourage them to collaborate. We can make writing tasks into pair work or group work, or include elements of pair work or group work within a writing task. There are several reasons for doing this. Firstly, it helps our learners develop their social skills as well as their English language skills. It develops their ability to collaborate and communicate, so those 21st century skills. And it offers extra support. It helps them to come up with ideas. It helps them to come up with language they might not know, and it gives them a bit more confidence in terms of creativity. We can provide visuals. We can ask our learners to create their own pictures or to bring them in. So in this example, this is from level 1 of Wonderful World. We're asking our learners to draw and then write about it. So they're going to create their own picture. We can also give learners pictures to choose from. We can find pictures either online or in magazines, for example. And we can base a writing task around a picture. So a bit like we did at the beginning with the picture that we said, what is this person thinking? Or what is this person saying? We could do the same, add in a speech bubble or a thought bubble. What is the person in this picture thinking? What are they saying? And then can we create a story around this? We can ask our students questions about the picture. So where are these people? Who are they? What can they see? And then this can be the basis for a writing task. Providing visuals helps our learners to come up with ideas. It gives them inspiration, but also thinking about them creating their own pictures or their own visuals, it encourages students to take pride in the presentation of their work. It also develops their visual literacy skills. Most exam tasks, if your learners are going to take exams such as, for example, the Cambridge English Young Learner exams, they require students to be able to talk about or to describe a picture or pictures. So actually providing a picture and getting your learners to write about it or talk about it is a really valuable skill. Writing topics for young learners should be engaging. They need to be relatable and motivating. So it could be by talking about something to do with their life, talking about their friend or a member of their family, talking about their lunch or their favourite food, talking about their favourite place. Topics that children can relate to and identify with. Now, that said, a lot of these topics are the same, aren't they? Every year you open your course book and you find these same things: places, foods, hobbies, school subjects. Why not give your young learners the option to write about something from a different perspective? So rather than writing about their favourite place, they could, for example, write about a place that they hate. Instead of writing about their perfect school, they could write about the worst school they can imagine, for example. So think about it in a slightly different way. Give them the choice as well. You can do this, or this. It lets learners take a little bit of responsibility and be a little bit more autonomous, a little bit more independent. And it's often enough to engage learners who are a little bit reluctant as well. We can let our learners choose their own characters. They might not want to write about themselves, either because they're shy or because it's just not something they're interested in. If they've written about their favourite food lots of times, they might not want to do it again. So we can give them the option to write about themselves or to write about someone else, or write from someone else's point of view. They might want to imagine that they are their favourite actor or their favourite actress or their favourite singer. They might want to think about their favourite film or book character, or their pet, their best friend, or someone in their family. What is this person's favourite food? What is this person's daily routine? And then they can write about that. Now, setting challenging but achievable tasks is what we're aiming for in Wonderful World 2nd edition by breaking down the tasks into individual stages. So we're not just thinking about writing as a whole, writing a recipe, for example. We're thinking about different parts to it. So first, we're thinking about the words we're going to use, that writing skill. We've got a model. We're thinking about how these words work in the text. Then we're thinking about what are we actually going to do? How do we structure it? We want our learners to be challenged because that's how they learn, how they make progress, but we do want the tasks to be achievable. So they're encouraged, not discouraged. They believe that they can do it. We need to give our early finishers something to do, to keep them from being bored, to keep them from disrupting or distracting the rest of the class. And there are extra activities and extension activities included in the lesson planner at each level for each unit. So maybe work in pairs, get them to test each other on things like vocabulary spellings. We could get them to write vocabulary flashcards or test themselves. We could write a word or a phrase on the board and ask students how many words can they make using these letters. Now, we spoke a little bit about visuals, but it's also important to encourage our learners to take pride in the presentation of their work. Visual presentation skills play a part in visual literacy, but also we need them to think about their handwriting and how they can make it legible. So how can we do this? We can give our young learners opportunities to illustrate their work. We can encourage them to think about their handwriting and write neatly. We can encourage them to think about layout and presentation. And we can give them the opportunity to display their work. I've often found that if you've got a student who has truly terrible handwriting, making it clear that someone else has to actually read it can be a good idea, and it can help encourage them to think about how clearly they are writing if it needs to be read by someone else in their class or their partner, for example. Now, finally, feedback. Obviously, we can feel like this at times, can't we? Just with the sheer amount of marking that we have to do as teachers. But remember, our feedback is important. Remember that writing is about communication. We need to aim to respond to the ideas that our young learners have written, so not just the language. And we need to mark positively. So thinking about what they've done well, not just mistakes that they have made. We're getting to the end, but if we've got something like this, the review section, so these come at the end of every 2 units in Wonderful World, we might want to make this a bit more interactive for our students. We could do something like turning it into a quiz, for example. Getting our students to ask the questions, answer the questions either on their own and then check with a partner in their group, or to work in groups to answer. Oop, there we go. Sorry. And then finally, we have video lessons. So if we're going to watch videos in class, obviously our learners love watching videos, don't they? They're really good for getting them engaged and getting their attention. But we need to remember to carefully stage them. And there are lots of helpful thoughts and ideas for how we might do that. So we've got before you watch activities, and a note on the vocabulary there. Got while you watch activities and after you watch activities. And the after you watch section always asks students to relate what they've watched to their own knowledge and their own experience. And we might want to use graphic organizers, so something like this, to help our students to organize their ideas. So if they're thinking about what you must do, what you mustn't do, and then maybe some things that could go in the middle. So things that sometimes are okay, but sometimes are not okay. So to wrap up, we've looked at lots of different things in this session, haven't we? We've looked at how children learn. We've looked at how we can use a picture. We've looked at how we can incorporate 21st century skills, how to practice vocabulary, and how to develop students' writing skills. So lots and lots of different practical ways that will help you get the most out of a course book, ways that will hopefully inspire your students and appeal to some of those ways that we spoke at the beginning about how students learn. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope that was helpful for you and that you've got lots of ideas that you can use in your classroom for different activities and different ideas. Just wanted to share briefly on the slide here, you'll see there's two links, one for webinars and one for In Focus. These are really good resources as well if you want to get some more teacher development, professional development ideas. We host global webinars on a really frequent basis, so there you can register and find out things from our authors, things from other teacher trainers, and In Focus is our blog that accompanies that. So there's lots and lots of practical ideas there as well. Okay, hi Alex.
Ellie, I think you said thank you to everyone, but I want to say a big thank you to you for such a wonderful session. Lots of amazing ideas that you have shared with the audience today, and you can see that in the chat box. They're all really thankful for your insights, I should say. So thank you ever so much to you once again. And just to say, we said at the beginning in regards to the recording and to the certificate, these will be sent out to you. Don't worry. 24 hours from now, you will receive an email from Zoom with a link to the recording, a link to the certificate, a link to the survey as well. So don't worry, those will be coming very soon into your inbox. So keep an eye open for them. Deanna, would you like to add anything?
I would just say thank you to Ellen for such a great presentation. Really, I'm now currently working with the Wonderful World level 2. So and on Monday the new week starts with my students. So I'm just now with a pen having lots of ideas, thinking how can I what I can do with them, so to boost their speaking skills and how to finally make them love writing more. So thanks a lot, really great ideas. And I would like also to thank all participants for watching and for your warm words. If you're interested in this series Wonderful World, please do not hesitate to contact Linguist Company in Ukraine. We will be happy to help you, to show you more, and to help you to choose the book that you will really love and be using for a long time.
Perfect. Thank you, Deanna. And yeah, just to say, finally, goodbye. Thanks for coming, and stay safe, stay well.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and also goodbye.
Bye, everybody.